right, well, let's talk about team. Now, we're going to cover a few things tonight. We're going to be covering, going into a bit of detail, obviously, what's in the book. And the book in the team, in the people section, talks about purpose, playing rules, progress, performance, and player selection or player recruitment. And we're going to expand on that a little more, because the thesis of the book is that it contains the 20% of information you need to know to get 80% of the results, like back to that Pareto principle. So there's more to it than the 20%. And when it comes to teamwork and leadership and all that sort of stuff, there is just tons of content there, and there is a lot to know. So we're going to give a few finer distinctions, but if we think about when you first start your business, when you first start, it's usually one person, you, the owner, and you start servicing directly to the customers. So you've got that relationship there, and you do that because generally you've started in a business that you're technically good at whatever that customer needs, and so that becomes your business. That's what you get into business to do. And you do a good job of it, and the customers keep coming back. They keep buying stuff, and the business looks after you with revenue, profits, and whatever else you need. But then you get good at what you're doing, and you get busier and busier, and all of a sudden you get to reach your maximum capacity, and you can either expand your capacity by putting in better systems, or you expand your capacity by doing what? Hiring someone, employing someone. So now you've got a team. And that's all well and great because you've got someone that can help you do stuff, they can help you look after your customers, and you can expand your capacity and do more. But the challenge is that when we get into business and we start by doing this, and we call that the technician, Michael Gerber called that the technician, that's a very specific skill set, and it's usually what you're good at, because that's why you went into business, to do it, because you're good at doing this thing. But now that we've got people on board, we all of a sudden need a new skill set called leadership. Let's use our pink again. Leadership. And this can be really challenging because, as we've covered so far in the 8 sessions to date, being a small business owner, there is a lot to know. There's a lot of stuff that we've got to be good at, and we generally bring someone in to help us because we're at capacity and we need help to get it all done. And so we bring this person in and we're like, can you just help me get all this stuff done? And then we start to learn, well, actually now I've got to start to look after this person too. There's things I have to do to be able to create a great environment for my team and make sure that person's getting what they need from their role. And it's another thing that we have to do. And this becomes a really big challenge for a lot of small businesses, and it often becomes a bit of a growth ceiling because the difficulty in dealing with people, and people are complex things. Like we've got emotions, we've got our own thoughts, we've got life logistics, we've got all these things that go on. Unlike systems, unlike the technical stuff you have to do, unlike finance or maybe even marketing, these are things you can just do, and it's kind of more logical, but the people element is way more complicated. And that's why we often see businesses that get to a certain size and they grow and they hire people, and the owners end up saying, you know what, I just want to go back to when it was simple and just myself. And they go back down to, or they want to go back down to where it is, and they don't break through that ceiling. Normally what is missing is the tools, the systems, the skills, and the leadership qualities that it takes to grow a good team. So we're going to talk a bit about that today. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but it does require a bit of work for sure. It does require a bit of work. Now I did mention a few things there. The only reason we want to hire people usually is because we're looking for growth in our business. And when we're looking for growth, we want to grow through using leverage. Leverage means we've got this small amount of input energy and we want to get a much bigger result out the other end. So we want to get as much as we can out of that little bit of input, and that little bit of input is you. Like, you're the owner, and so you've got to be able to grow your business by getting leverage, and we do that by using systems, which we covered, and technology. So those things we can leverage, gives us leverage to be able to do more with less. Marketing is a form of leverage. And obviously people is a form of leverage. So it's just good to sort of keep that in mind in context of why, I mean, it sounds obvious why we want to hire people, but this is what we're looking for. We're looking for to be able to do more with less in our businesses. So the 4 P's of people that I talk about in the book is number 1, purpose. Number 2 is playing rules. Number 3 is performance and progress. Progress and performance. And last one is player recruitment. Do you want me to say it again? Player recruitment. And that's my form of alliteration to form a 4 P's of people so we can remember what they are. Now, we're going to go into each of these, but I'm going to talk about a few things before we do. I want to talk about back this L word that we use, the leadership. So I don't talk about leadership at all in the book or very little, because there's so many books out there on leadership and it is a massive topic to get into, but let's just spend a quick moment on it. I want you, on a bit of paper there, I want you to take just 30 seconds and I want you to think about someone that you have either worked with or worked for, or someone you know or someone you know of that you would consider to be a great leader. Might even be you. And just write down half a dozen characteristics or attributes that you think makes up a good leader when you think about these people. Just take 30 seconds and just write down what first comes to mind of what makes a good leader. All right, what do we got there? Who wants to throw some at me?
Clear instructions.
Clear instructions. Can I call that clear communication?
Yeah.
Yeah, communication. So open, I heard another word. Open, clear, communication. What else? Supportive. Flexible. What was that, Harry? Knowledge, yeah, knowledge. Sharing. Then you scribe. Positive. Respect. What was that one?
Clear direction or goal.
Yeah, clear direction goals. Clear direction. Yeah, vision goals.
Develop a team culture.
Team culture. Team culture. Fairness, and what was that, Ada? Advocate.
I don't know if you explained it, but it was my best boss I ever had. She was very clear that she was our director, she was not our mate. So she was coming to birthday celebration or things like that, but she would just say 50 minutes and move on. So she was kind of like.
She didn't get too
"Happy
close.
New Year," whatever, but she always kept enough distance to remember.
Okay.
I'm your boss, not your friend. No,
Right.
I'm not here in work. I'm your boss.
Okay.
Your friend.
Yeah.
And I thought that this is very often gets blurred.
Clear boundaries. Okay, let's put that one up there. Yep.
And think about what the individuals or each team member's needs are rather than their own needs.
Yeah.
If they're
needs, professional development. So what's, yeah, so like less ego or whatever that might be. This might be in here, the individual needs, but I think leaders who care for others. I mean, if you look at all those things, and we can look at that and say, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. But if you think what it takes to be that person day in, day out, when you're often wearing different hats, like you're not always wearing the leadership hat all the time, depending on if you've got 2 employees and you're probably on the tools a lot yourself, so you're stuck in doing things and your mind is in doing things. So it's a challenge with small business to wear these different hats, But we can sort of use this as a bit of an inventory, and you can look at that and say, well, if I wanted to sort of score myself on some of these things, you know, where might I need to put some work in, or where's the opportunity for me? And you know, each of these is probably a topic unto themselves. But I think it's just worth putting that up there to shape that, because I don't talk about that necessarily in the 4 Ps. And this one here I want to highlight as well, the vision and goals. I think this is very important, that we know where we're going, and we talked about that in the planning stage, like knowing what the end game is, because when we can communicate that to our team, it brings them on a journey, or partly brings them on a journey, versus it just being a job. So let's come in and take a closer look at purpose. How would you define purpose? What does purpose mean? When I say purpose in the context of business, anyone got any idea what I might be referring to?
Why you do what you do.
Yeah, it's pretty much why. Why does the business exist? Why does the business exist? Now, why does your business exist? There's probably a whole bunch of personal reasons why your business exists. Like maybe it's to create financial wealth and freedom or stability for you in your business. Maybe it's to be able to create a lifestyle. Maybe it is something else.
Why then? There's why you do it personally, and then why does your business exist? Yeah, because what's your thing?
So a personal why and a business why.
Your clients value about what you do.
Right. Personal and business. Right, because they might have different personal reasons why they're doing something. This one should be the uniting. This one should unite, but there should be overlap, that, you know, everyone's personal why they're doing something should align and overlap with the business one. So, and if you think about coming back to business purpose, there's that law of precession that I talked about in another session, where I had a picture of the bee. Let's see if I can draw a bee. Is that a bee? Stripes? Is that all right? The bee, the flower. So what does the bee think its purpose is? To get the pollen. Go there. But what is the bee's true purpose? Right? What is it? To survive. But what? To pollinate. To pollinate. Serve the queen bee, maybe. Or that's probably what the bee thinks its purpose is. But it's going out and it's getting its pollen to serve the queen bee and to make honey. But really what it's doing is pollinating and keeping all of nature working.
But that's not its purpose. I mean, that's what it does, but that's not it doesn't know that it's doing that.
And it's not a direct analogy here, but sometimes we get focused on the goals or the growth of our business, maybe the money, the honey, the money. And if we can understand really what's our pollination, like what's the why does our business exist that's beyond ourselves? Because the bee does the honey for really, maybe for the queen bee, but at the end of the day for itself, because it might get in trouble if it doesn't collect the pollen, or it won't have enough honey to be able to survive. So it's acting in self-interest to some degree.
The bee's just doing it by instinct.
Well, that's right. So the analogy doesn't hold up exactly, right? Work with me here, Julian. Work with me here, right? That's right.
Like you think about it, it's like, for me, it's because I want my own dogs, but because of the lifestyle I want, I can't have my own dogs, because of all the other things I'm doing that this country doesn't allow dogs to do. So, but my clients don't care about that.
Right.
They
Right.
say, the reason why I'm doing it, because I'm providing a service to all these people that want to go on holiday.
Right. And if you were to hire someone who's, your personal why, which you articulated there, you might hire someone who doesn't have the same personal why. So you've got to think about what's the why for the business? Why does the business exist? So you think about, okay, if my business disappeared tomorrow, what gap would be left in the marketplace? And it's kind of, I've got a definition here which I kind of like. Purpose is the generalized intention to accomplish something that's meaningful to the self and consequential to the world beyond self. So it's this notion of thinking about something that is more than ourselves. And the reason we want to do that is because everyone has got slightly different personal whys we're doing something. And if we're all stuck in that, it's a very sort of narrow field of view, like we're sort of looking down or looking inwards versus a bigger why out in the bigger purpose. And I don't want to make it sound it doesn't have to be altruistic necessarily, but it's just got to be greater than an individual. So that when you're bringing someone in, they can connect with that and hopefully that aligns with their business purpose. An example, a client of ours, Sue, she runs a PR company. And while they do PR somewhat in the traditional sense, but they have a clear point of difference and they're all ex-journalists, the thing that unites them all is all the journalists that work in there have all left the media because they're disheartened with what the media represents. And they have this side hustle going called the Good News Movement, which they're trying to build up to generate a business case to show the media you can make money from good news. And so that's their why. That's why they're doing it. And so the people that come in, they're still doing the day-to-day stuff with clients, but the team are all there for the same reason, because they want to be part of this bigger picture, this bigger cause. So, just something to think about, because when I start talking about recruiting, or if you want to engage the heart of people and not just the head is like, how much do I get paid? When do I get to go home? What do I have to do the job? But the heart is, how do we fulfill this better? How do we do what it takes to achieve the goals? So it's like, how do we go the extra mile? And it's hard to get people engaged and to think that way if it's not for something that is greater than the self, if that makes sense.
And money's not the only motivator.
Money is rarely the motivator. So another way to think about this, money is important because people have to put food on the table. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've ever heard of that, Maslow has this theory that, we sort of go up the levels as we get certain things under control. And down the bottom, he says we've got survival needs. That's like food, shelter and water, survival. Then we've got safety, making sure that we're not going to get eaten by a lion. And then we've got belonging. We want to be part of something once these things are taken care of. And then we've got esteem, which is kind of like achievement. Okay, once we belong there, we want to go out and make something happen. And then we've got self-actualization up here, which is kind of like, and then transcendence up here. Self-actualization. And how do you spell that? Something like that. If and this might depend a little bit on the roles you're hiring for or what your intention behind a particular hire is, but down at this level, you're giving someone the paycheck they need to be able to survive. This is the money level, so to speak. Obviously, providing a good working environment and a good culture is really important, but purpose has incrementally more meaning, sort of the higher you go up. If this represents purpose, it starts to come in down here. So you start to bring people up a higher level of thinking and engagement in your business when you start talking about this sort of stuff. If you're bringing someone in to do a casual job for 2 hours a week or something, you might not sit down and have a deep and meaningful conversation about the purpose of the business, but it would still be part of the conversation. if you're hiring someone to be the CEO or managing director of your business, it's a very important part of the conversation, because you're looking to get people who care about that. You're not just looking for people that have the skills to do a job. You're looking for people that will engage at the heart level, not just the head level. That's a really key component of this. So there's another component or an aspect to it. There's a book written by a guy called Daniel Pink called Drive. Really good book, and it's about human motivators. And again, this ties into the money element. Like sometimes we think they've got to pay people more to be able to get more or attract people more or motivate people. But that's actually often a disincentive when it's that carrot and stick approach. If we incentivize enough, we'll get the right behavior. And in his book, he goes in to say that can work when you've got something that is maybe very process oriented and follows an algorithmic sort of progression. But when you've got something that is a little more creative and requires problem solving and a little more human mind, if you like, then that actually disincentivizes people. And the Coles notes of the book is that the things that drive people are a sense of mastery, which is kind of like always getting better. So you guys talked about professional development before. A sense of autonomy, meaning they feel like they're in control of where they're going, like they're not being told by someone what they have to do all the time. And the last one is purpose. People like to feel that what they're doing matters. It contributes to something more than just taking a paycheck home. So when you sort of try and think about these things, they're not sort of standalone issues. They're just things to be mindful of when you're implementing your practices and you're going about your people systems. These things are all very important. The book's fantastic. He gives you examples. Daniel Pink. Yeah. Daniel Pink. So it's really fascinating because this is the soft, fluffy stuff that's really sometimes quite intangible. But when you understand the human psyche and what drives us human beings, it's the stuff we really connect with, and the stuff that can really lift us up to another level. And if you're a small business that understands this, it can, gradually implement this more and more in your people practices, you will start to get way better people. There's a common saying that goes around, it's hard to find good people. And I'll say it's not hard to find good people. You've got to be a great business. If you're a great business, you'll find great people. There's a truth which can be a little confronting that says we get the people we're ready for, or the people that we deserve. And so as we build our business, right, as we become better leaders and we get a better business, we start to get a better team, and the whole thing can sort of rise up. So that's a bit about purpose. I'm probably going to leave it there unless anyone's got any questions or comments around that. It may not be the place necessarily, everyone's a little bit different. It may not be the place to start on your people practices, but something you want to certainly be thinking about. It's easy to gloss over and not pay attention to it. Because I suspect if you spend some time thinking about what the purpose of your business is and you start to get really clear on that, and it can take some time, but it starts to work for you as well.
You get better
Yeah,
buying.
100%. Yeah. And it can also help you make decisions. Like when you've got tough decisions to make, you come back to your purpose and you come back to your playing rules I'm about to talk about, and they can be sort of guidelines for you on how to make some tough decisions that you might not make otherwise if you're sort of looking at it through more of an analytical lens, the pro and con list. Yeah. So he's been great to sort of bring this into the fold. The whole purpose and why thing is a bit of a buzzword these days, but I think rightly so, because it used to be people talked about vision and mission. You have your vision statement and your mission statement, but really that's all a bit corporate, and it's sometimes hard to really connect to, and it's a bit formulaic. But the whole purpose thing is just that simple answer to the question: why are we here? Like, why does our stuff matter? Why does what we do matter? And when you can answer that, it can be very, very easy to understand, I guess.
What's that thing, when you had a small
It can be. It depends how you talk about it, I guess. But I never really connected with them. It always felt a bit. Yeah, I love purpose. To me, purpose is very, very simple. And like a lot of things I'm going to talk about tonight, if you say you did develop a purpose statement for your business, it's certainly not something to start putting on your marketing first up. Maybe you can, but it's certainly got to be internal first. Like if you live and breathe it internally, people will just be, you don't need it up on your marketing, people will feel it. And that's where it should start, is a really internal driver. Okay, let's talk about playing rules. One of my favourite things. And I would suggest this might be a starting place to think about putting in place in your business. So playing rules, otherwise known as your core values, rules of the game. It is about distilling what it is at your core that drives your behaviour, I guess. If you were to think about the best people you've ever worked with, and you had to, like in the leadership exercise, and you had to extract it, what is it about those people that make them really great? And not necessarily not around their skills and their knowledge, but around why they're great people to have in the business. From more a behavioural and a values point of view, you're trying to extract that out. Because what we're trying to do in our business is to, let's do it this way. If you were to take all the people you've got or ever had and plot them in this graph, so you got high skill, high attitude. Attitude meaning the fit with the values of the business, which we're going to talk more about in a second. But you kind of know people who've got a good attitude and people who haven't got a good attitude. So where do your A team members sit? Which quadrant? High skill, high attitude. All right. Let's make them green. Where do your B's sit? Here? Everyone in agreement? C's going to be up here. And D's are down here. We're going to talk about how to work with that in a second, but what we're looking to do is to create a team of A's and B's. So A's are your rock stars, B's are your puppy dogs, they're super keen, they want to be trained. Your C's, controversially, we sometimes call them the terrorists, because you sometimes think, or they think, that you can't do without them. And the D's, well, hopefully we just don't have any D's on the team. What's that? The anarchists, right. But the part of the playing rules is defining what this is, like defining what the right attitude is. And we ideally want to have that boiled down to 3 to 5, 3 to 7 core values that we have in our business. Now where'd my clicker go? Give you a couple of examples here. So the Four Seasons Hotel, they've got one, and it's just the golden rule, right? So do unto others as you would have done unto them. And great book, Isidore Sharp, who was the founder of Four Seasons, he followed the classic path of he grew and he got some good people on board and grew some more, but then he got really big and all of a sudden he was losing that connection with the culture. And he started traveling around. He could see that it had deteriorated. It wasn't there. So he spent 4 years traveling the world around his hotels, getting this back in place. And whoever didn't march to the beat, he got rid of them, because this was just core, absolutely core to their whole philosophy.
When you say you got rid of them, that would have had to start from the top down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was walking around looking at the people at the front desk and stuff. Because, if you've got people at the front desk like that, that's right. Yeah, or it's being tolerated from above or whatever it is. Yep. This guy, Keith Cunningham, he's just a business guy. I've done a bit of study with him, but he describes some of his businesses as he's sometimes hiring people straight off the prison bus. And so he says, I just keep it really simple. Do the right thing, meaning like, you know, if you're about to do something, your mum's going to see it on the 6 o'clock news, so you're going to be happy about it. Give it your best and show people you care. Now, I'll talk about this also in context of how you use this. So this is, again, not one of these things that you put on a bit of paper or make a nice sign up and stick on the wall and say, great, there's our playing rules. It's got to be embedded in the culture, and so we can use it a number of ways. We can use it, in hiring, either by talking about it or by using filtering techniques to help people deselect themselves. I'm going to share some stuff with you around that. When people do things well, you bring it back to where it connects on the values. And then when there are troubles in the business with people, you bring it back to the core values or the playing rules versus a subjective discussion around what may have happened. And there's, you know, we'll talk about how to do that. Another one, Southwest Airlines. You know, they've got a bit of a different take. They live the Southwest way and work the Southwest way. And then there's the poster child, Zappos, who I talked about in the marketing section, but these guys are really well known for their culture. They are the culture poster child. And there's a book called Delivering Happiness, I think, by Tony Hsieh, who was the CEO. And he talks about the whole journey they went on to develop this in their business. So they've got, if you look at them, one of the things I love about Zappos points to culture, and they've got a lot, but they're kind of very descriptive and unique. If you go look at some other companies, they've got like single word, which don't have a lot of depth and meaning to them. I encourage you, when you think about this, is to really try and get some language that's unique to you and meaningful to you, rather than trying to come up with something that maybe you could pull out of someone else's stuff. A client we worked with in Alberta, Canada, he worked in the oil fields out there. Pretty rough environment, and one of his core values was you eat what you kill. And that's what the company was. That's the way it was. And, you know, not every business would be happy having that in their core values, but for them it was exactly what their culture was. So it made sense. So how do you do this? Well, I've got a handout here for you. A guideline. So it doesn't have to be complicated. There's a couple of questions there to guide you. And in the book I talk about, there's really two ways you can do this. If you've got a significant team right now, or certainly some key people, it's advisable to get them enrolled in the process. You know, I have had situations where the team was a complete mess and the culture was not the right culture. In that case, we didn't get the team involved. That was a bit of a, you know, recovery situation. But usually everyone, you know, will come together and it won't take a lot of work to get clear on this stuff. And you'll find there's sort of 3 to 5 things in your business that define who you are as people in the business. And I think this is one of the most important things to do, because it can clear up so much and it allows people to self-govern their behaviour. When they've got decisions on how do I treat a customer, or how do I make this decision, or what do I do here, it can really be a guide for people to be able to make those decisions on their own. And as you'll see later, it becomes a very important part of when it comes to giving people feedback. This becomes an important part to help people self-assess and help you give them objective feedback. So when, for instance, let's say that you're a manager in Zappos and you've got an employee that's burning through a lot of paper in the printer, for example. Instead of going up to them and saying, hey, listen, can you stop using so much paper? Right? You might go up and you say, you know, number 8 here, how are we doing on that one? Right? So now it's not you judging them, it's against the core values. So it's a more objective, less fueled way of having sometimes some difficult conversations, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's take a look at number 3, progress and performance. progress and performance is somewhat about having formal conversations with people, sitting down and doing the old annual review. But it's often a lot less. So that should not be the major part of progress and performance. Or let me put it to you this way: if you did sit down with everyone, annually and do a formal review, which I'm going to give you a method to use to do that, whatever you talk about in that should not be a surprise to the people you're talking to, because you're giving that feedback all the way through. So there's really 3 ways to give feedback. Well, I mean, there's lots, but here's 3 to think about. You've got on the fly. You've got called periodic one-on-ones. And you've got a formal feedback.
Legally, you have to give some formal feedback.
Legally?
I was talking to my HR lady the other day. She said legally, when somebody's first starting out, they should have a 6-month review.
I don't know if it's, don't quote me on this, I'm not sure.
Maybe our award, or
With a 3-month probation period, so you must, if it gets to the end of that 3-month probation period, you must have
some kind of formal
evidence that you have at least talked the 1 month, the 2nd month, and the 3rd month to substantiate your decision.
Yeah, if they're not going to continue. Yeah, you do need written evidence before dismissing someone, for sure.
This was a bit different.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I think out of all of these 2 are the most important. So on the fly is talking about things in the moment, good or bad. Too often, if we feel we've got to sit down with someone, it's got to be this big formal thing. We sit down and we unload and we put everything on the table. That's usually around this one. That's a lot of stress. It's a lot of effort, and usually you've missed the moment of making it impactful, right? If you can do it in the moment, then it's way better. Way better to do it there. But then the periodic one-on-ones, again, depending on where your team are at and what they need, but it's very helpful just to have a 10-minute one-on-one with people where you can sit down and just have a conversation with them. How's it going? What's working well, what's not, what do you need help with? It doesn't have to be complicated. But one of the benefits of doing that is that you start to build a rapport with that person, and you start to build a safety to have conversations. And when you first start, and I got a client in Sydney that started doing this with their team about a year ago, and when they had their managers start doing it as well, and when they all first started, it was all very awkward because they'd never done it before. What do we talk about? How do we do it? And I gave them a format to use, which I can share with you. It's going to be a download on the video. But once they started doing it and they relaxed into it a bit and they just sort of made it less intense, there's amazing information that came out of the other people. But when you're just working day to day, often other people around, or you're deep down operations, some stuff doesn't always come up. And not that you have to get down in the weeds, exactly what's going on with someone's life, but if you're just showing that little bit of check-in and you can just be a little more in tune with what's going on for that person and what maybe they need in their role or what you can change, or even a chance to give some feedback in that, something they might be struggling with, then it does a lot of things. It helps that person feel valued because you're taking the time to spend time with them. It helps you understand them more and what they need so you can help them become better. And it smooths the lines of communication. So that when there might be something that's difficult to talk about, it's a lot less difficult to talk about because you've already got this practice in place. But too often, things that are difficult to talk about because we never talk. And so that's half the battle. But then the formal feedback, which is still really important, that we've got a system we use called a feed-forward system. And it's very simple. Very simple, but there's a couple of things you need in place first. You need to have your playing rules in place, and people need to know what they are, like that's been a discussion. And you also need to have your position contracts in place. So if you remember from our session last week, I talked about position contracts. On the left here, we had the key accountabilities, and then we had the indicators of effectiveness. So there was 5 to 7 things that person was accountable to deliver on. So we're going to use that on the feedback forward or the feed forward form. See, I don't know if you probably can't see it too well, but up the top here, we've got the playing rules, 1 to 5. And so what you would do is you would give this form to the person and you would say, take this home, give yourself a score on the playing rules, give yourself a score on the accountabilities. I'll give you a score, and then let's sit down and have a chat and see where we're aligned and where we see a difference. And I've seen a couple of situations where there was a big gap between what the person scored themselves and what the leader scored them. But most of the time, the gap is actually the reverse of what you would think. The person scores themselves lower than what the leader does, or it's aligned. Like they see, people are not deluded. Sometimes you get someone who is. But this format, it's a conversation, right? I mean, sure, there are situations that might be more acute where you're addressing a significant problem, but that's usually the minority of the time. And particularly if you're doing these things ongoing, you've got, some of these other practices in place, things rarely get to a heated sort of situation that requires acute action. So, and this is just a very objective thing. So you sit down, you've got your playing rules, you've got your score on those, and then you have a chat and decide if any actions need to be taken. And that doesn't have to be you talking about that. If you have a conversation, let's say they scored themselves or you both scored them low on point number 2, you might just say, look, what do you think you want to do about that? And they'll say a couple of things. Great, should we write that down? Great, write it down. And then, so you'll also set a date for the next time you're going to do this, if it's going to be 6 months, 3 months, or 12 months, and you keep this as a record. So if you do have a situation where you are addressing some issues that have some concern for you, this can become your written record as well, and your sort of toolbox to keep track of things and keep you guided to have those conversations. And then the same on the role accountabilities. Maybe number 3 they were low on, or number 5 they're doing exceptionally well. If they're doing exceptionally well, maybe the action is to train some other people in that, or if they're struggling somewhere, maybe it's to get some training in that. But you write it down, you've got a physical record, and there's also room there to talk about their goals, personal and professional. Depending on where you're at with that person, understanding them, if you know what their personal goals are, then you can help them achieve that by helping them do whatever they need to do in the business to be able to make those things happen, possibly. But again, you're showing that level of care for someone and helping them to become better. So if I had to summarise not just this process, but the whole people element of business, I would say that if you want to grow a business, grow your people. So as people become better, businesses become better. So that's the investment in people, spending the time doing this, giving them the training for different things. It's gonna pay off for sure. And so that's the next step, is to understand what is the path for someone. Where do they want to become better? What training do they need? How can you help them to improve? Yes. So
in a new employee, you might start off with that position description that you have there.
correct.
Given that our existing employees don't have that, would you sort of introduce that and summarise and say, well, this is how I see your 5 or 6 or 7 main areas of responsibility are?
Yeah, or get them to do it. I've had clients do that. I've had clients say, you know what, I've done a horrible job here of helping you get clear on what your accountabilities are, but I don't want to tell you. Let's work together to create it, and then you don't have to do it. They get to do it. I mean, that's not always going to work. Yeah, and it's against the discussion.
And it will actually highlight what we see and what they see.
Yeah, and when that happens, there's always a gap. There's always a gap, which is enlightening. Mm-hmm.
Well, the job description we put together was huge.
Right,
The responsibilities were huge.
right.
We thought we were doing the right thing, covering all bases,
Yep,
whereas you're saying 5 lines.
yeah. Well, again, the measure is it working or not?
Look, yeah, they're great employees, no doubt about it. And
Yeah.
everything you said tonight, we've done.
Yeah.
I feel we've done really well. But yeah, swapping from about a 30-page job description to a 5-liner is going to be a big job, isn't it? And you're saying a job description is not a list of tasks.
Well, I don't use job descriptions, so I use position contracts. Yeah. because really the job descriptions probably fall more into the systems. Like, here are all the things that need to get done, here's how you get them done.
Yeah, it was sort of areas of, it was responsibilities under all the different headings.
Right.
Because it's pretty diverse.
Yep.
Role, so we tried to cover everything we could think of, sort of thing.
Yep.
So there were no surprises. So
Yes.
there was none of this, oh, you didn't tell me I had to do that.
Well, the flip side is if you do forget something, then they're like, hey, that wasn't on there, right? But if you capture it in big topics, then there's a lot of stuff in there, and you got to use your thinking to capture everything you got to do to pull off those 5 things that you have to be accountable for. Yeah, much broader. Yeah, and you think about it when you get down to doing the review part. If you got to go through the list of 30 pages. Yeah, it's not going to happen, and people would enjoy it, and it would be arduous, right? Yeah. So this is the idea is simplification. Yeah, try and keep it as simple as possible while still targeted and clear. So before we move on to recruiting, let's come back to this one.
So the people that will give you that back thinking they're doing fantastic, but you think they're doing bad are the C's.
Right. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So what do you do with them?
Well, I sack them all. I did actually. So when I was in there was working for the wildlife trust with a young crew.
How do we deal with C's? What's the problem with C's?
They know it, can't teach them.
Down to the rest of the team problem.
So firstly, we've got to be very careful because we're the one giving them the label of C, right? And so first we've got to look at ourselves and say, well, how did we allow them to become a C? How did a C get to be in our business? And it's usually not so much about, it can be a mistake in recruiting, but it's usually a lack of clarity around expectations here. It's usually because the playing rules are missing. And we haven't clearly articulated that. And then if we haven't done a good job of addressing the issues along the way. So a C manifests usually over time, and it's something that we allowed to have happen. So I think we've got to own that first, right, before we go anywhere. And actually, before I will talk about how we deal with that, I also want to share another principle with you, or a framework. Another matrix. Let's go. So self-respect on one scale, respect for others on the other scale. When we are, well, let's start down here in the red zone. When we're in this area here, low respect for ourselves, low respect for others, we generally generate lose-lose outcomes when working with others, known as passive-aggressive, sometimes, that kind of behaviour. And we've got a mindset of, I'm not okay, and you're not okay. Right, that's the way that someone's mind would work who is in this quadrant down here. But then we flip up to, if we are in a situation we've got high respect for ourselves but low respect for others, we are going to generate a win-lose outcome. And this might be a hostile, aggressive, meaning win at all costs kind of mindset. And the way this person thinks is, I'm okay, you're not okay. The flip side of that is down here on the lower self-respect, high respect for others. Now, obviously, I'm drawing this as a quadrant. There's a continuum here. It's not like you're in one or the other. But here we're going to generate lose-win type outcomes. and the behavior is usually passive. And the mindset is, I'm not okay, but you're okay. Well, same kind of thing, right? Yeah, it's where you see yourself as less than in relation to whatever you're comparing yourself to. And same up here. It's the same. It's exactly the same thing, just the other side. It's this person sees themselves as better than, higher than, whatever. You know, this is a common boss-employee type relationship. It can, or parent-child type relationship that can come out. But where we want to be is none of that. We want to be where? Win-win. I'm okay, you're okay. And we call this one, what can I use? This is the assertive. Assertiveness is one of the best skills and characteristics and traits to develop. You can develop amazing outcomes when you have the assertive mindset. And I share this with you before we start talking about how to deal with people, because it's critical that when you go into these, you're coming into it with an I'm okay, you're okay mindset. You know, if we see someone else as being the problem, we're not going to get a great outcome. I mean, we might deal with the situation and eventually, you know, that person might be gone, but your skills remain the same and your point of view remains the same, so it's going to repeat itself. So this is sort of a part of leadership, is to sort of bring ourselves up in our level of thinking and how we look at others, even in the most challenging of situations, and that's where it's, you know, probably the toughest, but where the most growth can happen within ourselves. But it's just a great framework, and you can sort of check in with yourself. You know how you're feeling going into something. When you're calm and confident, you sort of know you're probably hanging around up here. If you feel anxious in any way, you might be down around here. Or if you feel angry, you might find you're going to default up to here. You don't sort of sit in one quadrant all the time. You might move around, particularly if you've got a habit of playing in either of these. You might flip-flop depending on who you're interacting with. You know, if you held someone on a pedestal at some stage and you met them and all of a sudden you put yourself down here because you thought they were really great, there might be, at some level, you feel there's a hierarchy of the people sit on. And so there's going to be a time when you're going to feel like you're up here. So I mean, the idea is to try and eliminate that. I don't know if you can eliminate that. We're human beings and we're complex beings, but it's a great framework to have in mind when in any kind of interpersonal interactions. Even when we're not having a direct communication, like an outward verbal communication, just check your own mindset around things when you're being around other people, because as we know, body language, the vibe that we give off can be felt. And if you're trying to create a great culture, then this is a great place to be. So with that in mind, let's come back to our C's. And the step to take with C's is to get really clear on this, right? And if you haven't done so, you know, you can start by saying, so we've done a crappy job of being really clear on what the expectations are around that. And then we just have a conversation, and an assertive, I'm okay, you're okay conversation, saying, listen, for this to work, we all need to be over here. And I don't know, you tell me, but what I see from you, I don't know that it matches up here. What do you think? And then, you know, someone's either going to fly off the handle and spit the dummy and leave because they don't like that, or they might change. There's also sometimes situations, I didn't happen this personally, but another coach I know talked about this, where there was a member on the team that everyone sort of thought was a C, but then when they, as a team exercise, they did DISC profiles. And then we talked about DISC profiles in sales, but let's revisit that. Another matrix. So we've got outgoing, and we've got reserved. We've got task-oriented and people. Does anyone remember what was in here? We had the D for dominance, I for influence or influential, we have S for steady, and we have C for compliant. And again, like all these matrices I've drawn up here, it's a scale. It could be anywhere on here to different degrees. So what happened in this team is they had a lot of people that were over this side, and this one person who happened to be in accounts was way off the chart over here, like way off the chart. And no one could relate to him. This could not relate to him. And so they pegged him as a C. But when they did the debrief on the exercise and everyone could see it and see how the behaviours lined up, and the penny dropped, like, oh, this guy's not a bad guy, he's just different. Sounds silly, right? But if we don't sometimes think about these things, because the way a C reacts under stress, or if you criticise a C, right? You criticise a C, they can get very defensive. And so the I is, maybe just throwing out comments left, right, and centre without any maybe regard of what they're doing. And this person was getting defensive on their work, and so that was the way it was being perceived. So anyway, the whole thing is, I guess, before we cast judgment too much, we look through a couple of different lenses to make sure that we're seeing it objectively. But let's say we are, then we get really clear on the playing rules, and then we have the conversation, and then we keep the leash pretty short, right? So someone needs to move over to here. They have to do that. And I think you guys started to allude to this before, but if someone's not doing that, it can be a lot of hard work, or they don't want to do that. It can be a lot of hard work to get someone to do that. And it's usually better for them to find somewhere that matches the values that they like, rather than stay in your organisation. Because what happens to your A's and B's if you have C's and D's on the team? They get frustrated. And demotivated, right? So then you start losing A's and B's. But when you've got a team of just A's and B's, and you're recruiting A's and B's, then it's easy. It's easy. Like seriously, when you get a team of A's and B's, problems start just disappearing. Like, it's just so much easier, which is why when we're about to talk about recruiting, I think it's one of the most important roles in small business, because if you start with just by yourself and then you hire one person, they represent 50% of your workforce. It's a huge amount of your workforce. And it's more than that, because you're juggling all these other things, and now you've got this person there. So the mental space that it can take up, and the training, like to train someone is expensive as a small business, because it's taking your time. So it's the less number of people you have, the more important hiring is. Like if you've got 100 people and you make a bad hire, well, the cost is, it's still costly, but it's not going to be the end of the world. But a bad hire in a small business can be very, very costly. Because it's not just the cost of the wages that you've paid that person. What else? What are the other costs involved in making a bad hire? Reputation, time. Yeah, the time in training. Now you got to go and do it all again. Opportunity costs. Yeah, it could be the damage they've done. So let's talk about how we recruit. Supplier recruitment. Well, the traditional way, the way that a lot of people do it, is they put an ad out, they get some resumes in, read through the resumes, create a shortlist, bring people in for an interview, have some interviews, decide on the best candidate, maybe do some reference checks, and then make a hire. And that statistics show that method has about a 14% success rate of finding the right person. It does vary, because some people have a better intuition about these things than others, but yeah, all in all, it's not a great process to use. And the other problem with that system, apart from its lack of success, is that it's time intensive. Like to go through resumes, to sit down and do the interviews, do the reference checks, it all takes time. And particularly if you find yourself interviewing with half a dozen people or 8 people or whatever it might be, it's a lot of time. So we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to use a deselection process where we cast the net as wide as we possibly can, and then we put hurdles in the way that people trip over and deselect themselves, and we end up with just a small pool of people that are the ideal candidates for our role. So a couple of things we need to have in place before we do anything, and that is we need to be clear on the position contract for the role. We want to be clear on our playing rules. And if you can also have a sense of vision and purpose, that is also super handy. So that's like the foundation. That's the foundation. And then from there, we will write out a description of our ideal candidate. So just like when we're doing marketing, right, I had you guys write out a description of your ideal customer. Well, this is marketing too. This is, instead of marketing to get customers, we're marketing to get staff, to get people. So we've got to do the same thing. This stuff here is kind of like, the playing rules and vision and purpose is like a USP. That's like when you're marketing for customers, that's the why you should come and work with us. And the ideal candidate is obviously so you know who you're going after. And there's a download you can get to for a form on how to fill out, to prompt you for different things. But even in the ideal candidate, like you articulate things that you might not be able to actually select for or ask people about, but it's about setting the intention of who's going to be the ideal person for this role. Doesn't mean it's the exact person you're going to have, but it helps you get really clear on who's going to be successful. And some other things you might want to think about in there is their DISC profile, what's going to be a good fit there. And once we've done all that, we can now write an ad. And I encourage you, even if you're going to use your network to find people, even if you're going to use your network, which is a great way to find leads, but if you don't have a process, it's also sometimes one of the most dangerous. Like if you're bringing in your neighbour's dog walker, right, and you think, we know who they are, they sound like nice people, let's just bring them in, okay, right, and you don't run through any process, you're setting yourself up for problems potentially. So the ad, I got a sample here for you. Now this is a sample that I wrote for a hire that I was making. Where am I? What's that? It might be. It might be. I should know that, shouldn't I? Yeah. Book was written a long time ago. Thanks. Yeah, is that in the book? Yeah, it's the one in the book, right. And I haven't got a better example for you because I haven't found an ad that works better. I've now got a bunch of clients that have R&D'd this. So as you read it, I want you to read through it and don't think about, would this work for me? But I want you to draw out the principles of the ad. Like, what is in that ad that may have worked? Because please understand, like, I wrote the ad, so it was from my perspective and for the person I was looking for, which may not be, the same as you. Your approach might be and your style might be different, and probably would be. But I'm just going to give you a moment to read through that. So, like us, at the time I was in a regional area, and I got 25 applicants and 8 that made it to a shortlist. I'm going to show you how we get to a shortlist. And they were, the person I ended up hiring was someone that came out of a national brand who ended up taking a role with me for about half of what he could have earned somewhere else. And there was a couple of factors in that, but let's talk about the ad. What did you draw out of the ad? What were some of the elements in there? And, again, don't try and think about would this work for you or not, but what are some elements in that I've talked about so far that are in the ad? Personalization. Where did you publish this? Everywhere.
What does that
Seek, website, socials. I had put out to my network. Yeah, everywhere that I could put it. Yeah, and that's what the next step is. You want to cast it everywhere, a wide net. You want to be inundated with applications, and that's not always possible. I got a client right now who's an arborist trying to hire, and it is a super tight labour market. So they're not getting tons of applicants, but they are getting applicants. But they also just hired now for an office admin person, inundated with applicants for that. So it depends on the role, right? If you're looking for a rocket scientist, there's less of those around. So personalisation, what else is in there?
Attitude, all through it. It expresses what attitude of the business is about.
Right.
Expectations.
Yeah, so therefore what you want, the person who is going to apply is somebody that is going to be enthused by the idea of working in a business that aligns with their attitude.
Yeah, the certain person. Some people read that and go, what a load of garbage, right? Yeah, but they won't apply. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Depending on the attitude of the person, you
Yeah.
want somebody that actually, can be work on their own because they value the balance that you're speaking about.
Yeah, so you're trying to express in your ad who you are so that people can connect with it. It's not a help wanted ad of here's the job, here's where we are. Like it's not left brain, it's right brain. So it's got to be written. It's got to be written with some heart.
Did your arborist use a similar style of ad?
They did, but they're different to me. So the same components are in there, but with a different flavour. Yeah.
That relaxed, flowy sort of.
Yeah, but it's probably theirs is a bit sharper. Yeah, which sort of is just more of their style. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Was there some purpose in there? Yeah, purpose is in there. Was there any values in there? Any playing rules? Yep, that was in there. A bit of fun, wasn't too serious. And I don't know. I mean, if you look at most ads out there in the marketplace, they all sort of look very similar. So when you're writing an ad, you want it to be different, and you write into this person. So you get a picture in your mind of who that person is, and then you write the ad for that person. So you're not writing it for everyone. So that's the first step. You've got to write an ad that's different. It's got to have some heart in it. Be written from the heart. Cast the net as wide as you possibly can. Because how do they apply? What was the instructions on that ad?
In their own format.
Via email. Is there an email address there? Yeah, so they reply via email, and what they got back was an autoresponder that said, thanks for applying. Gave them a little bit more details about the business and really appreciate you taking time to apply, yada, yada, yada. Look, I'd like you to call this phone number and answer these 5 questions. So, phone, 5 questions.
Was that like an automated service?
What's that?
Was that like an automated service?
The email was an... No, so lots of ways you can do this. You can get a virtual phone number for $20 a month, or you can just say to someone, call after 5 and before 8. Make sure you message them. You leave detailed instructions in the email of exactly what they need to do. What's that?
If they're in the 4 or 5, they're not with us.
Well, that's it, right? You see how well they follow instructions. Yeah, that's right. Now, I'll use the admin assistant who my client just hired for. They got, I don't know, about 80 applications. How many do you think did this step?
30?
It's usually about 25 to 30% do this step. Yeah. So if you were going through resumes, you're going through 85 resumes. Possibly, you got a question, Ada?
Yeah, it just seems really impersonal to, like, if I were to apply for a job and straight away get this autoresponder, it almost just feels like that your employer has even, or your potential employer,
Depending how you write it.
at.
It is how you write it. It is how you write it.
Because I did give it some thought last time I did some recruitment, and in the end I had an auto response, but I did send it a day or 2 later.
We can set that up too. Yeah. Yeah. It's up to you. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do it this way. You can do it however you want. And I have some clients that don't do it either. I think you can write in a way that it's well received. And if someone, my personal view, if someone's going to get upset about it, well, yeah, see ya. Yeah.
I think it's probably the industry you're in as well. So if you're professional, you're used to auto responses, whereas if it's different industries, they might not like that.
I've tested in a lot of industries. I've had trades say to me, look, most of the guys I hire don't even have an email address. I said, okay, what do you want to do? He said, okay, let's give it a try. And it worked fine. It worked fine. Yeah, so I mean, test it. But the methodology here is about saving time as well, right? And it's about allowing some of these filters to deselect the 65 people who are really just fishing. So if you're only looking for, there's only going to be a half a dozen people out there that are going to be a fit for you, that's more of a direct headhunting type conversation, right? That's probably phone calls. But if you are dealing with, you're going out for a cold outreach and you're going to be getting people in who you don't know really who they are, then to me, filtering makes a lot of sense.
You're not going to find the approach if you're recruiting a CEO, but if you're recruiting like
I would.
a person,
No, I absolutely would.
even
Yeah, 100%. I use it for everything. Everything.
I thought it would be more that through your networks and kind of more headhunting.
Well, I do, but I put them through this still. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I just like put an advert looking for a cleaner for the dog house. And flipping out, it said very clearly you need to be able to supply an invoice. And I had 4 inquiries, all of them asking for cash in hand. And I said,
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to have to deal with unqualified people. So I put filters in place. And you write the email nice. It's an enticing email. It's selling the position a bit more, talking a bit more about the vision, talking about why the role is so important. And look, we really appreciate taking it. You might even say, look, I know this seems a bit sterile, but we know the right people will take the step, and we invite you to do that. Your choice. You can do it or not. But what you can tell from this is, do people follow instructions? Do they prepare? You can tell a lot from someone's voice message, way more than written word. It's just the little nuances you pick up about someone are very telling. And then what you do is you create a shortlist. So you'll know from listening to them which ones are a good fit. And at that point, you can look at resumes if you want. Resumes are helpful, but I wouldn't do that yet because the next stage is to do a test drive. So test drive is when you are in most roles, there's 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 skills that are really important for that person to be successful and thrive in that role. And one of the biggest challenges that people have when they're recruiting is they say they told me all the right things in the interview, but then when I got them into the role, they couldn't do half of what they said they could do. Well, let's find out. Let's find out what they can do. And so we created Test Drive, which is a virtual test. And you get a bit creative on this. Depends on, again, what you're hiring for. I had a guy that had a car washing business. And what he asked someone to do was to describe in detail how they would go about washing a car. And so what he was looking for was just how they think. And, some people just said I'd get the bucket out, I'd wash it and hose it off. Other people said I'd make sure I did the inside first, and they had a lot of detail and thought behind it. And so you can just tell a lot about someone in that situation. I had a guy who was an IT person, and he created some broken computers. I busted them and brought people in and said, fix this. When I hired Melina, my assistant, I had 3 things they needed to be good at. And so one was, a bit of administration. I gave them a bunch of receipts and said, compile these into a spreadsheet. I said, we're running a seminar. How do we keep track of people coming out of it? What would be the process? And another one was a simulation around an upset customer, a good customer that would upset, we'd screwed up their schedule. How would you deal with this? So customer relationships, a bit of sales, and a bit of administration. And so I had 8 people go through that. They did the work, and you can just see immediately who's got the skills and who's got the thinking behind it to be able to do it. Now,
Expectation on the amount of time.
well, see, this is an interesting point, right? Because you're asking people to give time, but this is why you've got to sell it a little bit. When I did the marketing one, in between here, from the short list, I sent out a video to, I think I had 10. This is a while ago. I sent out a video where I sat down and I talked about why our work's important. I gave examples of clients, and I told some pretty compelling stories of the impact we have on people. And I said, the next step is going to require you to take a bit of work. I'm going to be asking for a couple of hours of your time. If you want to bow out at this point, no problem. Just let me know you're out. Or if you're in, send me an email saying I'm still in. And 8 of them sent the email saying I'm still in. And so then I sent them the test drive.
And your expectation on how much time they put on it?
Oh, it depends. Depends on the role. Like for the marketing one, they had to write a press release. They had to write an outline of a social media plan. There was probably 4 hours of work in there. Yeah. But I don't think there's a rule around that. I mean, I don't think so, but it's up to you. If you ask too much, no one will do it.
No, that's right.
Right? So you got to find that balance point. So you are selling all the way through it as well. Like you're giving people a compelling reason why they should keep going for the right person. And the idea is that you're helping people who are not the right person realize they're not the right person and deselect themselves. So that when you sit down and you have an interview with someone, right, because out of the test drive, you'll get your top 2 or 3, and then we're going to do a DISC profile. DISC profile and an interview. But now you're spending time with people who you know a lot about, and you've seen a lot of you've seen their behaviour, you've seen how they interact, you've seen some of their skills. So now you're spending quality time with, in theory, quality people. Does that make sense?
I have to say, I did all the rest of it. This was the stumbling block. What's the tester?
The test drive?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what skills do they need?
Graphic design and web design skills. And they need to take time to show us that.
Oh, no, come on. You can get someone to design something.
Yeah, but then my expectation is I want a good designer. I expect them to spend probably 6 hours on it. Can I really expect somebody to spend 6 hours on something?
What's the benefit to them?
They get a job.
Well, come on. I can get a job anywhere.
They get a job with us.
Yeah, so you got to sell that. You got to sell that. You come back to purpose. Come back to the reason why your work matters, and you've got to be clear on that and convicted on that, and that should come through in the hiring process. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. I mean, you're not trying to be nasty about it. Like it's a very natural process, and you be upfront. I'm very upfront at the start. Look, we have a process, and there's going to be some time invested, but we do it because we want to make sure we're making the right decision. We want to make sure you're making the right decision.
Do you tell them to the beginning that it's all the process? Or you
I tell them at this stage. Yeah, I let them know what the rest of the process looks like.
Before they do that test drive and invest that time.
Yeah, they can. Exactly, 100%. They know what they're getting in for. Yeah, it's very transparent. Yeah, yeah.
I understand that. That was my blocker. It's like, what do I get them to do?
I think the more you're thinking, it might be there was an issue with the hospitality staff where people were asking for trials, and actually you end up getting like 3 shift out of the people that were going to recruit. And that was there is a bit that is law about it that you can't do it for X amount of time, but they have to be supervised. So it's kind of like you will get.
Yeah, there's no hard rules around any of this stuff. And I say to clients when we start with this, I said, look, this is the system. Pick and choose the pieces you like. I recommend the whole thing, but you do what the fit is. So then once we do that, and there is again on the website there'll be a download for guide on interviewing. In interviewing, we want to make sure we're asking behavioural oriented questions. So they are basic questions that ask someone to recall a situation in their past when they've done something. There's another good book, and I'm going to blank on the name right now. It's related to the guy who did the book Top Grading. But anyway, he's a psychologist who's done hundreds and hundreds of interviews, and he said after all the things that he's tried, the most consistent evidence of what someone's performance is going to be is their past performance. So he'll go through their resume and ask on every role they've had. He'll ask, there's 5 questions he asks, which I won't be able to recall now, but it's along the lines of, why did you leave? He's trying to work out, did they get pushed or did they get pulled to a better opportunity? You say, what were you responsible for? And what did you do really well there? What achievements are you proud of? And then he'll say, when I call your supervisor there, what will they say are the areas you need to improve on? And there was one more question which I can't recall. But that's a good technique. It's called the threat of reference check. So instead of, it's an inferred thing, right? When I call your supervisor and ask them this, what are they going to say? Is a great way of positioning a question because it just gets a little more honesty sometimes. Yeah, behavioural oriented or situational is like, tell me about a time when a customer's really upset and you manage to talk them off the ledge. Is better than, are you good at customer service? Are you good at dealing with difficult customer situations? Or tell me about a time where you had to put in, an effort over and above. Or tell me about a time when it's that kind of questioning that you're recalling from someone's memory, and you can tell if someone's making stuff up, or they should take a moment to think about it. And
How many questions usually do you put something through an interview?
as many as you want.
Okay.
Yeah. I got a list of, I think, 113. Don't ask all those. All right, yeah. You highlight the ones you think are applicable. But and they should be asking questions too in the interview. They should be asking questions of you. And it's a two-way thing. I really believe that bringing on a team is a partnership. It's not an employer-employee mentality. That's more along the I'm okay, you're okay. It's hey, let's agree to work together. Let's have a partnership where you'll give me your heart and your effort and your best performance, and I'll give you a great place to work. I'll give you more than adequate compensation, and together we can both get what we want. Like that's the mindset that you want to have going into it versus I'm going to give you a job, right? Because that sort of, I don't know, it just breeds that little bit of entitlement, or I'm doing you a favour, or you owe me, or that kind of can have a sense to it. Again, it's back to that I'm okay, you're okay point of view. So a couple of other things I want to cover, and I better hurry up, is the onboarding. So when someone starts, you want to be ready for them. You want to be completely ready. Like if there's business cards involved, have them there. If they need a workplace, make sure it's all ready to go. A great technique is, particularly for a hire that is very important to your business, and I had a client just do this recently. He sent, so as an architect, she was just starting, he sent a bottle of champagne and a welcome to the team card to her house. So before she started. So you think about what that does, like someone's starting a new role, there's a bit of uncertainty, maybe the partner's wondering, how's this going to go? And all of a sudden this bottle of champagne turns up with a card of welcome to the team. It's like, wow, this place is awesome. And so when they turn up on first day, they're not wondering if they've made a good decision. Like they're in 100%. So you want to do that, and having a training schedule doesn't have to be thorough, but even if you just say, hey, here are the things that we're going to train you on, or here are the things you need to become competent in over the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, just lay out a bit of a pathway for them so they can see what it looks like. There's a bit of a clear direction and some level of expectation of, by the 3-month mark, you should be able to pick the grapes without ruining them, or whatever it might be. Just so you've got some guidelines on how you're expecting someone to move forward. Probably, there's all the other stuff like making sure you got your policies and procedures tight and all that element of it. But
Can I just go back a step, sorry?
Yes.
Before. In your process, at what point do you talk dollars? Because you haven't actually...
Yeah, sometimes right up front. One of the questions here is, what's your pay expectation for the role? Yeah. Yeah.
And that was in which section?
The email or a responder. Yep. Yep. So I'm going to dovetail, because you're talking about money. I want to briefly talk about profit sharing, which is maybe a weird thing to talk about at team, because it's somewhat of a finance thing too. A philosophy, money is obviously important, and depending on how tight the labour market is, money becomes maybe more important. But you've also got to be careful if you start offering big money for roles that you're creating a little bit of a noose sometimes for yourself, because now you've got this fixed overhead that you've got to make sure that you cover. And I think a profit sharing is a great way of mitigating this. So if you can go to market and be hiring at a median sort of wage, or even a step below, you're minimising your daily outgoings, but you supplement that with a profit sharing, which done well means they should be able to earn above market. And I think that's a great way, because when you've got a profit sharing model that's done well, your team are helping you to create the profit. So they're bringing the value that they're getting rewarded for, and they're aligned to the financial goals of the company as well. There is a bit involved. There's a great book called Ownership Thinking by Brad Hams, would be the go-to on this, because it's probably the simplest and I think the most effective, and he's got lots of case studies in there. Hams, like as in, Christmas ham. Yep, smoked ham. And another good one, which is a few levels up, a book called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. All the same philosophy. It's about working together to create an outcome that helps everyone get what they want. And money is one of those outcomes, right? I mean, everyone wants their business to be profitable and make money. Well, your employees and your team have got things they want to do with money as well. They've got financial goals. So if there's a way to align everyone in that, you'll find that the outcome for everyone is better, right? Because there's, I believe in open book management, sharing the numbers, like not hiding anything. When we don't share numbers, people make up stories in their mind about what the numbers are and all sorts of things. In fact, Brad Hams in his book talks about his surveys when he works with teams, surveys them and ask them, how much money do you think the business makes? And the numbers are astronomical. Sometimes people think that 50% of revenues is what the profit is. People they don't always know. And so when we can educate people how businesses make money, how every little decision makes a difference, and if we all make decisions that align to more profit, and we make more profit, we all get a share of that, then we're all aligned. We're all marching to the same beat. And there's it can overcome a lot of problems. But it's a bit of a controversial one, because people, I think, generally keep the numbers close to the chest, and it's not something we always share. But I think it's worth exploring, breaking out of that.
What professional helps you put something like that in place? Is it the accountant,
The coach?
financial advisor, the coach?
Yeah, I don't know. I do it with my clients. Most accountants are not very equipped at it. Yeah.
Has your book got any formulas?
No, it doesn't. I can give you a quick one. So if you work out a stretch goal for revenue or sales, and then you come back to your profit model that we've discussed and work out what that profit number would be, then you want your system to set up to pay it between 8 and 12% on top of salaries. The profit share should equate to 8 to 12% of salaries. So when you hit these goals, someone who's making 50 grand should get, let's say it's 10%, should get an extra $5,000 in their pay. The reason you want to aim for this as a minimum is because that is the number that starts to get motivating. When people see that number, they're like, oh yeah, okay, this is going to make a difference. Anything less than that, it starts to be a little, and when I say stretch, like you should feel like it's achievable, but it's going to take some work. You don't want to set the 8 to 10% just on business as usual.
And is that all encompassing of the whole business profit, or just certain streams?
No, you want to make it holistic as you can.
And it would be KPI based. Is your outcomes that they're reaching, or
No.
not necessarily?
No. The beautiful thing about this is that when everyone works well, you make profit, right? That's the idea. Because if you start to individually track people, which you can still do from an individual performance point of view, but don't tie it to profit sharing. It's more of a personal performance conversation versus a profit conversation. You want it to be one big bucket that everyone has to work together to create the big bucket. And if someone's not pulling their weight, everyone else, hopefully if you breed the right culture, is going to say, Johnny, pick your socks up, mate, because you're getting a share of this, and I don't like the fact that you're not doing your bit, and We have to get, so a bit of a team culture to help everyone work together.
I've got a question about how do you handle sort of, if you're a small business, you're a director, and that really sort of influences the profit. If I say, oh, I want 10 grand less wages,
Yep.
that gives us 10 grand profit, or the other way around. So what is a good wage for a director?
You got to normalise it. So meaning, what if you had to hire someone to be in your role to do what you do, how much would you have to pay them? And that's the figure that goes into this number. So yeah, there might be two sets of numbers if you like. There's the normalised numbers that you work out the profit sharing on, which should be fair and transparent. But then you might actually do it differently because you might pay yourself very little salary and take dividends. Yeah, so you got to normalise the number in here so it's representative of what would be true.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, yeah,
What about, like, I guess, if you've got a lot of people on a minimum or award wage,
yep.
You can't really offer them less than that to then motivate them to earn more.
No, you can't. So you're stuck with that. Yeah.
So that's your normaliser, basically. So the only thing you can do is motivate them to do more, and so they'll get a share of the profit.
Yeah, that's right. Most people who are on minimum wage are not in businesses that have profit sharing, I would suggest. Yeah. Not many businesses do this, so it's a differentiator. And so you've got this, and then you work out, and there's a bit of a formula here, but you've got to make sure you've got a floor, a profit floor, because you've got to reinvest in the business. You might have to service debt, so interest will be up here, but principal repayments won't be. And you've got shareholder, let's call it shareholder, right? The shareholders my belief is shareholders should get something before it all gets divided up because they're the ones taking all the risk. So let's say that you've got 100,000 in profit. You might say, you know what, the floor is going to be 50,000. And that's going to be divvied up into these things here. So we've got a $50,000 pool, and you can choose what percentage of that goes to the profit pool. It might be 100%. You might say it's 50%. If it was 50%, then 25 goes to the pool and 25 goes back to the business. This just means that as profit grows, you're not just capped at the floor you've set here. Profit keeps spitting back to the business the more profitable you become, but it also keeps spitting off to the profit pool down here.
And then that 25,000 is divided up amongst the staff.
That's right.
At a percentage of like the 8 to 10%? Or
Yeah, well, you would take your wages line, and you would, let's say that's made up of, let's say, 3 employees. Someone's on, for easy math, let's say someone's on 10,000, someone's on 20,000, and someone's on 40,000. All right, is that easy math? That's not easy math. Let's go with 30,050. All right. So this person's going to get half the pool because they've got, it's prorated. Yeah, exactly. This person's going to get 20% of the pool. This person's going to get 30% of the pool. What's that? So this is the model. This is where you've got to work out the model because you've got to work out that this number here, if when we hit this target, the profit was going to be 100,000, you've got to work out how do we make all this work so that this amount, this profit pool, represents 8 to 10% of wages. Yeah, you got to play around with this to get it to work out your model. Yeah. But they're the factors to think about, and then you pay it out on. That's right. Yeah. And it could be more. It could be more. Yeah. I like to have it unlimited. Like, if we can make it so they earn way more.
But you're saying to get value out of it, it needs to be 10%.
Yeah. If it's like 4%, it's not going to be very motivating. Yeah. Yeah. But I encourage you to don't take what I've written here and implement this tomorrow. Right? Grab Brad's book and read it because he goes into a lot of detail on how to do it. And you. See, I don't like, there is a place for bonuses, but the problem with bonuses is that they're usually given out without much structure. And if you give a financial reward without any clear structure and meaning behind it, then a sense of entitlement can kick in. I got this last year, why aren't I getting it this year? Which is why I much prefer this, because everyone's got to help generate that. If everyone helps generate that, then everyone gets something.
Bonuses is for one person, it's not for.
Yeah, and then you get silo thinking. You're like, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do to get my bonus. That may not work for everyone else, but if I can still hit my KPIs and get my thing done, then I'm okay. So we all have to work together to make it work to get the reward. Yeah. So again, a couple of things that Brad talks about, but culture is number one. People, the right people, so A's and B's. You would never want to put in a profit sharing system, can't find my ABC, there it is, to fix this problem. Right? That would be a disaster. So you want to get this right first. Right people, right culture, education around financials so everyone can understand what the numbers mean. It doesn't have to be talking about debits and credits and profit models and so on. It can be, using the analogy of Brad does in his book of the household budget. Look what happens when we do a few little things differently. Now we can pay off debt and have a holiday, versus before we were spending too much on X, Y, and Z. And then you translate that into actionable plans that people can help within the business to make the business more profitable. So now you've got people actively working to increase profit in the business in an educated way, and they're the right people. Very powerful formula. And if you've got someone in your business that's making, let's say, 15 to 20% on top of their wage, because it's just humming, and they get an offer to go somewhere else, it's going to be a pretty damn good offer. Because you think about how engaged someone is. If they're helping to create this and they understand what drives the business and they're really a part of it and they're getting financially rewarded for it, and they're doing work that matters, like it's a meaningful thing for them, that's a sticky proposition. And then when you're recruiting someone and you've got that environment that someone's going to come into, you've got a lot to sell. You've got a lot to sell versus just selling a job.
I like the idea a lot. How would it work if you, say, put managers in on a profit share basis, but not the whole team? Would a similar sort of scenario?
Yeah, you can do it.
If your managers were motivated, they're going to motivate the team in turn, because the profit is going to be driven up from the team that they're managing. I'm trying to get a plan to get out of the joint, that's all. So.
Yeah. You can. Look,
Yeah, I know, but I'm just...
the pitfalls that you want to be careful about is creating an us and them mentality.
Yeah.
Because even if people didn't know it was in place, somehow the feeling would be there. Yeah, so I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but you just want to be careful about it. Yeah.
Because it's all about motivating the people.
I think the question to ask there would be, why wouldn't we do it for everyone? Yeah. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, but just something to ponder. Yeah.
It's a whole new way of thinking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's a true partnership model.
Somebody's not pulling their weight, and therefore I wouldn't want to put it in for that person.
But no, that's a performance issue, right? That's a performance issue. That's the feed forward, the candid conversations, assertive conversation. That's management and leadership, not profit sharing. Yeah. So the profit sharing is not this is not a performance management tool. Yeah. 7:30, folks. We probably better wrap up. So summary actions. What do we do from here? So draft out your playing rules. Number one, clarity on the business purpose. I would definitely start with the playing rules. If you haven't got that, that is the place to be. Start some one-on-one meetings. And as I mentioned, there is a download on how to have one-on-one conversations. If that's not something you're comfortable with, I got a short document that can help you there. And implementing the feed forward system, reviewing your recruitment system, maybe pilfer a few ideas from that, and take a look at profit sharing. So profit sharing is not the one to start with. If you haven't got that other stuff in place, then start there first. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone.